Section 8. The United Nations Organization. Introduction. In this study section, you will explore the reasons for the setting up of the United Nations organizations, the principal organs, specialized agencies, achievements, and failures. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to explain the reasons for setting up of the United Nations, point out the functions of the principal organs of the UN, highlight the various achievements of the UN since 1945, discuss the shortcomings of the UN since the time it was founded. Overview of the United Nations Organization, UNO. In 1945, representatives of the world's nations met in San Francisco to set up a new league for United Nations. This was an initial move by Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin of USA, Britain, and Russia respectively. Delegates from 50 nations met in San Francisco on April 25, 1945, and drafted the UN Charter containing 111 articles. This was unanimously approved. Thus, by October 26, 1945, the United Nations was born. After the Charter establishing it was ratified by 5 permanent members of the Security Council and representatives of 45 nations. The headquarters of the UN was located in Paris, but later on shifted to New York. The UN has as its objectives the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Geneva Conventions in order to influence all nations to follow international laws so as to make the world a better place to live in. Principal organs of the United Nations. The principal organs of the United Nations are 6, and they are the General Assembly, the Security Council, Trusteeship Council, the Economic Council, the International Court of Justice, and the Secretariat. The General Assembly. Almost 200 nations send their representatives to the General Assembly, which meets once in a year, and each nation has one vote to exercise at the time of electing non-permanent members of the Security Council, or electing members to the Economic and Social Council, or electing judges of the International Court. The Security Council. It is the most important organ of the UN. It consists of 5 permanent members: US, UK, Russia, France, and People's Republic of China, and 10 non-permanent members with a 2-year term. It hears complaints of member states regarding threats of war and violation of peace treaties, and takes immediate steps to resolve the issues. The 5 permanent members enjoy the power of exercising the veto, and all resolutions need their concurrence for passing. Trusteeship Council. The UN Charter provided for trusteeship system for the people of those territories who were unable to govern themselves. So, they were entrusted to nations like France, UK, USSR, China, and the US for temporary governance till such time they could be recognized as independent states or willing to join other independent states. The original trust territories held by these powers have become independent. The Economic and Social Council. The UN was established not only for maintaining international peace and security in the world, but also to undertake work for lifting the common masses of developing countries. The Council also set up regional commissions such as the ECE, Economic Commission for Europe, ESCAP, Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, ECA, Economic Commission for Africa, ECLAC, Economic Commission for Latin America, and ECWA, Economic Commission for West Asia, for the purpose of better governance and focus. The International Court. It consists of 15 eminent judges drawn from different nations to hear appeals on disputes brought before it. Its headquarters is at Hague. All member states who have signed the UN Charter have automatically become parties to the statutes of the court. The decisions of the court are binding on the parties to the dispute. For example, the International Court settled the dispute between Nigeria and Cameroon over Bakassi Peninsula. The Secretariat. The Secretariat is the backbone of the UN. The offices of the UN are located within the Secretariat under the headship of Secretary General. The UN Secretary General is the Chief Executive Officer. He convenes the meetings of the Security Council to deal with important problems affecting world peace and security. He is ably assisted by a staff drawn from several countries, notably by Deputy Secretary General, Under Secretary Generals, and Assistant Secretary Generals. The expenses for running the UN are shared by member nations, bulk of the money coming from the US. Several agencies of the UN maintain their offices located in the capital cities across the world. Achievements of the United Nations. The successes recorded by the UN since its establishment in preventing wars are numerous. Some of its achievements are summarized thus. 1. UN was able to avert world war on several occasions. For instance, the Suez Canal crisis in 1956 would have blown into a full-fledged world war. France and UK pitted against Egypt, but for the intervention of the UN. 2. In 1962, the United Nations played an important role in averting a nuclear war between the two superpowers over what is known as Cuban Missile Crisis. The USSR had to remove its missiles from communist Cuba, buckling under the US threat of waging a nuclear war. 3. Another veritable achievement was how the UN waded into the matters that arose between the State of Israel and Arab nations in 1948. 4. UN also waded into peacekeeping missions of various degrees all over the world, from Congo to Liberia, from Cyprus to Kuwait, as well as rendering intelligence and military support to fight terrorism in Afghanistan, Yemen, Iraq, Pakistan, etc. Failures of the United Nations Organization. As far as the United Nations is concerned, it is difficult to assert that the UN has failed in as much as the body has prevented the outbreak of world war since its establishment. However, the body has recorded some shortcomings as far as maintenance of disputes are concerned. Some of these are summarily highlighted as follows. 1. UN after the Gulf War has been described as a pawn in the hands of the USA. This is because the affairs of the UN had since been dominated by the USA influence and financial strength. 2. UN has failed in the disarmament campaign, particularly its failure to discourage the stockpiles of nuclear weapons and thereby rid the world of nuclear wars. 3. The UN has failed to resolve the West Asian crisis. For instance, Israel has defied UN Secretary resolutions number of times without meaningful reprimand. 4. UN failed in preventing the aggressions against many countries by the big powers. Russia's aggression on Hungary in 1956, on Czechoslovakia 1968, and Afghanistan 1978 to 1979. 5. On the issue of human rights, it could do nothing in China, Yemen, and some countries in Africa and Latin America. Study session summary. In this study session, you examine why the UNO was established. You also learned about the structure of the organization, achievement, and setbacks. This is the end of study section 8. Thanks for listening.